tell the audience about how you got started in real estate.
What were you saying about the Austin guys?
So he's one of the few people in the country that I've seen make HUD work with a merchant build model.
How so?
He just sells it and eats the penalty.
Really?
Yeah, and he builds such a good product, and he sells institutional quality, which HUD, you don't generally see that, but he builds such a good product, and he sells it to the last few, I believe it was Equity Residential.
Oh, RIP Sam Zell.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
So he sold to them 2 of his projects in Austin, and he does a lot of outside Austin, and so now there's just a big affordability push in Austin, and it's a question of, is it actually affordable? Because the rules are 60% of the units have to be at 80% AMI, 10% have to be at 60% AMI. The problem is at 80% AMI, that those levels set by the government are higher than market. So
Wait,
are you actually affordable? The answer is
just because Austin's salaries are so much higher? Interesting.
So PFC, HFC structures have been a big thing right now in Texas.
What were those acronyms? Public something?
Yeah, it's PFC and HFC. So it's Housing Finance Corporation and profit. I forgot what it is for PFCs, but PFCs have essentially been outlawed in the state because there was a big article in San Antonio how people are doing exactly what I'm saying. They're getting the big trade-off is you get 100% property tax abatement.
Oh yeah. Barrett's doing that right now.
Yes, exactly. He's doing a PS, so he did it on his HUD loan. So it's a 99-year ground lease. It's out in San Antonio. I forgot the name of his project. Southton is his project.
Yeah, and he's got Bishop Ridge as well.
That's where his redevelopment, and now he's adding brand new units. But he did the PFC, he did HUD, and now one of the things, he's been in touch with one of the guys in our office. He posted about it, but those federal tax credits, the 45L and the 179D.
Yeah.
So it pairs well with HUD. You probably saw one of the Berkadia guys post about it, but one of the big requirements of HUD is prevailing wages. One of the big triggers to take advantage of those tax credits is prevailing wages.
It's not I always want to say Kevin Bacon, but is it Davis Bacon?
It's Davis Bacon, yeah.
Interesting. So why do HUD loans take so long?
So it is a dual underwriting process. So we as the MAP lender have to underwrite it. Then we submit it off to HUD, and they have to re-underwrite and check off every single thing we do. So they have underwriters who specialize in each different segment. So the appraiser, environmental, on the mortgage credit side, asset management side, if the sponsor has done work with HUD before, and they need to check every single box. So the rule is once you submit your application to HUD, they have 5 days to get back to you and make sure you submit a complete application. Then they have 60 days to process the application. But every time they ask a question, the clock pauses. So it's on us.
Of course. And do you find like most sponsors are they're either full HUD or never HUD? Or is it like sometimes they'll go bank loans, sometimes they'll go hard money loans, sometimes they'll go HUD? What do you typically see?
We've seen up and down the spectrum of late. Historically, you have been folks, developers, sponsors who were 2 feet in HUD and just decide to take advantage, build their business model around it, around the strengths of it, and it worked really well. Of late, HUD has made a few different rule changes that have been more appealing to some of the bigger shops. So for example, before September 7th, 2023, you couldn't distribute cash flow profits more than twice a year. Now,
really?
After a 1-year seasoning period, you can distribute monthly. And if you have 5 HUD projects that are in good standing, which means positive REAC inspections, annual inspections that HUD have, you can go right off the bat to monthly. So that helps with bigger funds who have quarterly distributions they need to make to return to investors. So that's opened up the pool.
Interesting. So why would someone go, from my perspective, other than like a very, very, very long application period, HUD seems like a very compelling option. So why would someone go, I guess, why should someone go HUD over like a bank loan? Like what are the benefits at a high level? Let's say, speak to someone who has never done a HUD loan, they've only done bank loans before.
The biggest difference has got to be the non-recourse nature of HUD loans. It is non-recourse with the exception of the bad boy carve-outs, so that'll free up your balance sheet to go probably do more and more developments and build your business. The other part that people like HUD for is the higher leverage. So it's 85% loan to cost on market
Love high
rate.
leverage. Yeah.
85%, you're not going to really beat that,
Yeah.
but it's also the 1.176 DSCR ratio.
Yeah.
So that's been the big bugaboo of late with rates where they are and construction costs where they are. That's where we're being limited at. So generally now we're in the 70-75% range. So that's still better than most banks when you're getting 50 to 65, depending on how strong you are with that bank. Other than that, it's that security. If you're long-term, if you're in a market where you're not playing the cap rate game, you're not going to refinance every 3-5 years or build to sell. That's why HUD really thrives in secondary and tertiary markets. It is a great way of hedging risk on the back end because it is a construction to perm. So 2 years of construction, interest only, and then 40 years fully amortizing.
40 years. Is there one program where it's 35, one that it's 40?
Yeah, so sorry, I was talking about the new construction. So new
Okay.
construction's 40.
Yep.
The 223F refinance is the 35 year.
Okay.
So,
And do you see people do, I'm going to get all these numbers wrong, but the 221 construction loan, do they refinance into the 223F or how does that work?
so it's an automatic conversion for the D4. So that's the main reason why people don't like the D4. Most people like to build, come off their construction loan and then refinance and recap their equity back to investors, hit their promotes, get into the waterfall structures that they may have. With the 220 D4, that doesn't exist. Whatever your loan amount is at construction, that's your loan amount for your perm for the next 40 years. That said, the 223F has gone very popular of late because HUD does not care about your basis. So they rely very much on their underwriting metrics, the 7% vacancy factor, the 80% leverage, and the 1.176 DSCR. And so when rates were really low in the 2%, like back in 20 and 2021,
The good old days.
yeah, great days, you could return 2-3x of your equity. And we had a few situations like that. Out in Arizona, I had a project that we locked at 2.5 all in, and they returned 2.5 extra equity.
Maybe I'm just traumatized from the last 2 years, but like having the same loan amount after you finish construction for a few years, like really isn't that bad, in my opinion.
That's where we've seen the shift.
Yeah.
Going to NMHC and a few other conferences, you've seen more people consider HUD because that recap is not really what they're building for. They're looking to hold it long term. One of the silver linings of rates popping, all the loans we did in 2021 are really low and attractive. So you've seen a lot of HUD assumptions come to market. HUD assumption is 5 basis points, which is pretty cheap compared
good.
to everything else.
Yeah.
But you can also assume a HUD loan that has a 2.5% interest rate for 32, 33 years left on it. So you had bigger funds get acclimated to HUD by going through that because there's no point in paying this off.
Yeah.
I'm not going to beat this.
Is the assumption process pretty clean or is it like a huge pain in the ass?
It's a huge pain in the ass, to be honest. But
Everything's too good to be true. So,
it's gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
So back in 2014, there was a whole revamp of HUD's process and all their offices, but it's still a 60, 90-day process. If you work with the big thing is finding a good lawyer. Find a good lawyer that's gone through the HUD process. They will make sure your package when you submit it to HUD is bulletproof, and that'll save you so much time. We have so many groups who are going to HUD for the first time and trying to assume one, and they're like, no, I'll use the guy I've been using forever. It's like, yes, there's a familiar there, but their package won't be as buttoned up, and then you're going to get just delayed over and over with HUD.
And so you said something about the refinance. So let's say I built a market rate apartment complex, and I'm faced with either a cash-in refinance of, call it 15% of my equity, or it sounds like I could refi with a HUD loan. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you're seeing that pretty frequently these days?
More often than not now, we're seeing a lot more developers who had shied away from HUD, using HUD, because it's like, do I pay $4 million cash in with Fannie Freddie Bank, or do I take a cash neutral, maybe even slight cash out with HUD? And we're seeing more people do that, along with the fact that the prepayment penalty structure is much more lenient with HUD.
What is the prepayment? Is it just the step down versus yield maintenance?
Correct. So it's 1098, 76531. So after 10 years, there's no penalty structure. With Fannie Freddie, you have that yield maintenance, so that's inverse relationship. So if everyone believes that the Fed will cut rates and rates will come down, your penalty will just skyrocket on you.
Yeah.
So
That's I always love that argument. Like, oh, I'll just refi when rates come down. It's like, if you want a huge penalty, like go for it. But
then
probably
you
not
run
gonna-
into the next fallacy of supplementals. Like Fannie Freddie have supplementals, and everyone's like, oh, I'll just do a Fannie Freddie supplemental. It's like, well, stress your rate by a point. You have to have at least 5+ years on it. Can't go over 70% LTC, and it's at the lender's discretion. So
So good luck.
yeah, pretty much. They're good when you can pull them off.
Yeah. So I want to, speaking of supplementals, you mentioned HUD has a supplemental, and we were talking about it before, and I'll butcher all the numbers, so I'll let you describe it. But you're talking, I think it's 241A.
Correct.
So let's say I have a 500 unit apartment complex, and I think I want to do it in 2 phases. How would that work with the 241A?
Sure. So it depends how you want to build it. So there's different ways. You can build it using conventional financing and then refinance into 223F, or you can build it using a 221D4. So the most home run way of taking advantage of 241A is if you build it conventional and then refinance using a 223F. Why? You avoid Davis-Bacon wages on phase 1. So say you split that 260, 240. Phase 1 is 260, so phase 2 has to be smaller to utilize the program.
It could be like 251 versus 241, right?
Correct.
Or 249.
Correct.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, yes, and then buildings practicality kicks in, but yeah, exactly that.
So is it based on unit or is it based on cost?
Unit.
Okay, cool.
So
you could build it with conventional, ignore or not ignore, but not be subject to those Davis Bacon wage laws, I guess I'll call them.
The requirements, yeah.
So you refinance into that, and then you refinance so many numbers. You refinance into a 223F.
Exactly.
And then you use a 241A to build your second phase?
Correct. So on the phase 1, you'll get 35 years, fully amortizing, 117 DSCR, 80% LTV, depending on what your limitation, where rates are at that time. That's set, done with. 241A allows you to add additional units. And the reason why I say if you build a conventional is the home run scenario of utilizing it. You're not, even though it's a HUD construction loan, since phase 1 was not subject to Davis-Bacon wages, phase 2 is not subject to Davis-Bacon wages. So
shit, really?
So that really kicks in. So for example, Davis-Bacon wages has a amplifier. When you go to 5 stories or more, you get subject to commercial Davis-Bacon wages. And that's a really killer.
High.
Yeah, that's where it really kicks in. No matter where you are in the country, that's where it hurts. So if you're building another phase that's 5 stories and you don't have to build, you get 90% loan to cost, a 1.11 DSCR on a combined NOI over the first over the phases. So the existing NOI of phase 1, the proposed NOI of phase 2, and then that's your 111. The other big thing is generally, unless you're doing a LIHTC deal, HUD does not allow for a developer fee via BISPRA. Most developers take advantage of BISPRA. It makes the developer fee and GC fee paid outside the loan. With the 241A, that does not exist. So both a developer fee and a GC fee are mortgageable.
Okay.
Which has been huge.
Yeah, I love those developer fees.
Yeah.
So, okay. And before the show, we were talking about kind of a misnomer that HUD requires affordability. It does not require affordability, but there are some benefits to affordability, right?
Correct. So generally, when people think of affordable, think of LIHTC. And so if you're doing LIHTC, or if you have a self-imposed LURA land use restriction agreement where you have 40% of the units at 60% AMI, you can qualify for what HUD deems affordable. And the main benefit of that is a 115 DSCR and an 87% leverage point on a non-cash out situation, or loan to cost if you're doing a D4.
I can't believe the amount of leverage that you can get with this. This is crazy. Are there loan minimums on this? Like, could I build a duplex or a fourplex?
You need to have a minimum 4 units. The big thing with HUD, and you asked like why people would do it, one of the main reasons people wouldn't do it is the fixed cost. So if you have a market rate deal, HUD application fee is 30 basis points. If you're an OZ, it's 20 basis points. Then you have to do all the third-party reports. So it's PCNA, if you're doing a refinance and appraisal, energy, radon. If you're doing a ground up, it's market study, again, another appraisal, twice you have to do it. So all those things add up, and those are fixed costs. So that'll be.
Do you think there's, like, in your opinion, is there kind of a threshold, like, hey, if you're doing less than 20, like, just go get a bank loan? Or do you think it's more market subjective?
I do it mostly on loan amounts. So in my mind, if I was a developer, if it was under 10 million, I would not do a D4.
Okay.
I think a D4, it's a 12-month process if you've never done one before. And it's long, and you're probably better off going to a local bank relationship and get that done, shelves in the ground. The big negative to D4 also is that you cannot touch the land while your application is under process. You can only touch the land. You can't do any grading, start site work, nothing, even out of equity until the loan closes.
These government programs drive me nuts with things like that. That's insane. And some more benefits. We talked again, another note before the show. HUD will kind of go where maybe local banks or regional banks or even Fannie and Freddie won't go. So what are some of those markets, like tertiary, rural, like what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of name an obscure place in the country that not many people have heard of, and HUD will go there. It's probably one of the cooler things about my job of learning about the different places.
You get
for example,
visit all the Springfields in America, all 8 of them or whatever there are.
We've done a fair amount of Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah.
We've also, one of the cool places, because I tend to focus a lot on the mountain states, going down to Texas and then the Sun Belt. Billings, Montana, Bozeman, Montana. One of our clients is taking a look at a project up in Kalispell, Montana.
Never heard of it. Sounds great.
Not until we reached out did we hear of that. I've learned a lot about Vegas and their suburbs, up and down Utah, so going all the way down St. George, Santa Clara, Ogden, Springville. That has been really cool. A lot of Texas too, so I wasn't really familiar with like Midland and Odessa, and then going down to Rio Grande Valley, places like that. Really interesting.
I'll take your word for it. I have no plans to go to West or Middle Texas. I'll only go to Dallas and maybe Houston. And so is there anywhere that HUD doesn't work? Is there like no commercial requirements and that type of stuff? Like where else would you say don't do a HUD loan?
You don't see many HUD loans in the major metros. So New York, Chicago, LA, Miami. Main reason of that is HUD there's a third limitation factor that I didn't mention before. So it's DSCR, loan to value / loan to cost, depending on the project type of HUD loan you're pursuing, but it's called statutory limits. So it's HUD's debt per unit calculator. So they won't do the super luxury. So it's a calculation on a function of your unit mix, and they have a value assigned for each studio, 1 beds times by your market value factor, which is usually 270%. And I'll send it to you after this. It's really weird.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. It's a weird one. And then your land value, and then something called cost not attributable, which is everything that is not in the unit itself. So your common areas, your clubhouse, things like that. And you're almost always stat limit constrained in the major metros. We've seen a little bit of a break in New York because of how the community banks haven't been lending as aggressively, and HUD has relaxed their rules of late, continually relaxing rules and statutory limits. But the 421 tax abatement deals in New York have been gaining popularity with HUD.
Okay. And so just to walk that back for my own sake, it's because the cost per unit is too expensive?
Correct.
So do you see a lot less maybe construction projects based on concrete, maybe more like 3-story walk-up garden style apartments? Is that more common, you'd say?
Very much so.
Okay.
With construction costs rising as they have, we're seeing a lot more 4/2s, things like that. One of the cooler projects we've worked on that was a HUD construction loan was a $128 million loan down in DC called City Market at O Street. That was really cool. That's like a poster project for HUD to show how it could work in an urban metro.
So how did it work? Like what made it interesting, or like can you talk about the construction design of it?
It wasn't more about the construction design that made it work. It was more that in DC they were required to use union wages anyway. And union wages are higher than prevailing wages. So that made the economics and allowed them to take advantage of the D4. And there's an amplifier for D4 if you're in an urban renewal zone. You flip to a 220 that allows for more retail, because you alluded to that before and I didn't answer it, but HUD generally doesn't allow you to go over 20% in terms of NOI and gross floor square footage.
For the retail component.
For the retail component.
Okay. And
so that allows you to go 25 and 30. So it allows you to go even higher.
Okay. And we were also talking kind of in Salt Lake City, maybe it's a little bit more difficult to get a HUD loan right now because it's based on allocation. Or maybe I'm wording that wrong, but there can only be so many HUD projects going into the ground at the same time. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Now it's a little bit weirder. So one thing that HUD tries to do is not cannibalize their portfolio. So they want to do 2 deals that are going to come up and lease up at the exact same time, concession each other into death. They don't want that. So Salt Lake City, I think there's 5 or 6 220 D4s going out in Salt Lake City proper right now, or trying to happen. The main issue with that is because of what has happened on the bank side and the leverage loan to cost being cut so dramatically, you have a lot of people dual tracking it. So they're not fully committing to HUD because they're exploring, but they're running through the process. And so HUD is probably being a little bit more lenient right now with Salt Lake, allowing so many deals to advance past initial stage, because they even admit, we don't know how many of these are going to come through. So the can has been kicked down the road a little bit further. So
Okay. And how do they segment that, like geographic availability? Like if I have a deal in South Salt Lake, do I have to worry about what's going on in Salt Lake City?
Great question. So one of the things as part of the market study we have to do is establish something called a PMA, a primary market area.
So many acronyms with this.
That's HUD. The best one I've heard for HUD so far was HUD backwards, duh. So yeah, that's the best one I've heard thus far. But the PMA, primary market area, establishes based on jobs and population, and that's how you draw your radius. But within that radius, you have to include all that same supply. So all the projects coming on, HUD looks at a 3-year timeline. So that establishes what you have to include there. And then half of our responsibility as a lender is how many of these projects are real. You know, everyone says I'm going to break ground in XYZ months or things like that, and then it's my responsibility to go and flush that out.
So are you calling these sponsors being like, are you really going to build this?
Pretty much. Very much so.
Oh, this is I love the commitment. That's awesome. And again, you said that radius of jobs and stuff like that. Do you know off the top of your head, like how far that expands?
No, that's why we usually, one of the good things, so I love him to death and he's a big pain in my butt, but our chief underwriter, Gary Amy, was a market study analyst. And so he does a good job of briefing us as originators where he believes a PMA will come in. And it's like, guys, like you and I spoke about this before, but Austin, guys, please don't.
Yeah.
Like we're going to have a hard time establishing a PMA. There's 50,000 units coming online in Austin. Have fun. And so that's been our responsibility. We've been able to get it done. If you work with groups that are strong sponsors, HUD will make exceptions. There's a client of ours that every time they get on a phone call with HUD, HUD knows them by name and know that they're committed to their projects long term. They haven't sold any of their HUD projects. So HUD will go to bat for that.
Okay.
That's good.
And another thing I have in my notes here is the audited financials. So there is, I mean, I think with the more you get the government involved, the more layers of, we'll call it bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Audited financials, what do those look like?
So it's fairly straightforward. That's a bit, everyone's really worried. It's like, oh, are they going to come check my personal returns? No, that's not the case. HUD has no interest in that. I really have zero interest in that.
Not even like the initial application.
The initial application, we look at PFS and REO like you would do with any type of loan. On audited financials, no.
Okay.
The audited financials are for the property level only. So every year on a property level, you have to submit your audit by March 30th.
So, I mean, that's less cumbersome than like a Fannie Freddie loan then, right? Other than, because Fannie and Freddie have those same reporting requirements, but maybe they might be quarterly.
They don't have to be audited. They don't have to be checked off by a third party. That's the main pain in the butt. So.
And is that you doing the audits, or is it a completely different?
Whoever the sponsor chooses.
Okay. So
the sponsor can use their own third-party CPA. It just can't be done in-house by the sponsor, but it can be whoever, the same person they've been working for years.
Okay. And you mentioned kind of HUD sponsored track records. What if I wanted to go build 200 units right now? How much would they scrutinize me versus like a different sponsor? Like what type of expertise do you need, or what type of experience do you need?
So you're building 200?
Sure.
So if you're building, HUD looks at it more extensively. So if you don't have HUD experience, they want to make sure your team, the development team, has HUD experience. So meaning your architect, your GC, and your management agent. So if you have those three, you'll be fine. If your team is lacking in one or more on top of that, then they will be like, you should probably bring someone on for your first deal, a consultant or something like that, to help you to get through the process. If you are a HUD experience sponsor, then you can get through, especially if you have a positive track record with HUD, you can get through pretty much any type of scenario.
And do they really care? This is just kind of my own benefit, but like, do they care how, it's non-recourse, so do they care how big of a project your first one is? Like, could you just go throw up 400 units if you kind of check the other boxes?
Yes, you can, but one of the things we have to do early on in the process is called a VOD, a verification of deposit, to show that you have the funds to close the deal. Okay. So that's the hard part. So we run into that fairly often with clients that are raising equity, because you have to show that money, but you're not going to raise money now. So it's that game of how much money do I need to get through the application process, how much money do I need to show now for the project, and then timing that out to make sure that money is there so we can prove it out to HUD.
And what was the percentage? I don't know if you mentioned that.
So it's 15%. 15% depending on what your loan is.
Equity or?
15% equity.
Okay.
Yeah.
15, what do you need to show, the VOD?
You have the money to close the deal. So if your loan is 85%, you need to have the 15%.
Oh, in a bank account, like ready
Correct.
to go. Wow.
It doesn't have to be there after that. Like after you show HUD, you just need to show them you're liquid. You can move that money and do what you will, but it doesn't have to be locked there.
So why would people do Fannie and Freddie over HUD after all the great benefits that we just talked about?
The biggest one is interest only. So Fannie and Freddie will do interest-only payments, and that'll help your bottom line on the cash flow, especially now as rates are really high, things are tight. That is the biggest. Fannie and Freddie also have flexible terms, so they'll do 5, 7, 10. They'll do floaters that have 1% prepayment penalties allowed to get out. No one's really doing many floaters right now with SOFR. So those are the biggest reasons why Fannie and Freddie are popular. The negatives of them is like 1.25 DSCR for Fannie and Freddie, 30-year amortization. They used to have 35 on a wider scale, but now it's only if you're affordable. That's most of the reason why people do Fannie and Freddie.
Okay. And so just to clarify with HUD, they're all fixed rate, non-recourse. Where are the flexibilities and where are they not flexible?
So the biggest one, and why you're seeing more people do HUD right now, is something called the interest rate reduction program. So after you close your loan, HUD will allow you to modify down your rate after the loan closes.
How?
So
And
there's
why?
a mechanism.
Yeah.
The why is the best reason because everyone,
Yeah.
even clients we've closed with, like, you're full of it. HUD will never let me do
Yeah.
this. And when we pitch people on HUD, they're like, this doesn't make sense. This is pie in the sky. You have to look at HUD as the insurance agent. So they don't want a default. They don't want to have to pay out that claim. So they have this program to mitigate risk. So if you look at HUD's default rates historically, it's really, really low comparative to Fannie and Freddie. So the cost of it is legal. For the most part, it's articles of good standing, things of that nature, making sure you're in compliance on that front and no zoning violations. Say you're at 6%. Rates now on a stabilized deal, your deal's built, rates today are at 4%. It's 3 years after that, so you have a 7% penalty, 10.9867. Instead of 4, you end up at 4.7. Why? Because each point of penalty is worth roughly 10 basis points. So you have that penalty, you don't pay a dime out of it, out of your own pocket. It gets rolled into the interest rate. Why do you like to do it? Because you're going from 6 to 4.7 for $6,500 out of pocket.
This sounds awesome.
We did over $2 billion of them during the pandemic.
Man, I wish I had some 3% 40-year money. That sounds fantastic.
The lowest rate we have on our books is 2.35, including MIP.
That
In Littleton,
jealous.
Colorado. Actually, too.
Well, I guess it makes me feel better that it's not in like somewhere cooler, I guess. But
There's one we did out here on South Temple that has I believe 265.
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So how are those rates determined? Are they based on treasuries? Are they based on vibes? Like, how does that work?
A lot of vibes. Actually, it's funny you say that because it is a lot of vibes, but it's also 10-year treasury. So the benchmark is 10-year treasury. The vibes part of it is how the market feels sentiment-wise, really.
Yeah.
So with Fannie and Freddie, you'll see it's like spreads have tightened, spreads have widened, and Fannie and Freddie are very upfront and transparent about that. Even for us as lenders, we don't know what spreads look like until we go out to rate lock for the most part or ask the Wall Street banks. It's more about what their individual banks will react based on what their balance sheet looks like. So many of them got hit during COVID. A lot of the smaller banks were not aggressive on Ginnie Mae loans, HUD loans. And you saw a lot of the big players step up. So the JP Morgans of the world, Cantor Taylors, those groups really stepped up and filled that void. And that's still very much what it is today. All these banks fixing them. Like one of the biggest banks we worked with was Credit Suisse. They don't exist anymore. They never opened
You're
up.
kidding. What happened to them?
Oh, yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah.
So that desk never reopened,
Yeah.
even after the takeover. So it's a lot of supply and demand. So right now, when you talk about vibes, everyone thinks rates are going to come down, the Fed funds rate, and we've seen HUD spreads tighten because of that.
Yeah.
And turn of the year, balance sheets freeing up. So HUD rates, despite 10 years spiking up, have steadied or if not come down net over the last month.
So if you locked one today, treasuries are like 4.2, I think, today.
Yeah.
So roughly what rate would that look like?
Before MIP, mortgage insurance premium, you're probably looking like 125, 130 over.
That's pretty damn good. Like
Yeah.
5.5 right now.
Yep.
That's like positive leverage for a lot of deals.
Yeah, it's why we've seen a lot, especially in this market. We're pretty cool. HUD has gained popularity.
Okay. And MIP, mortgage insurance, what is that and how often are you paying it?
So it's a great question how you phrase it, because everyone's like, oh, if I pay down my loan XYZ, does MIP go away? So it's not, people compare it to the single family home side.
Exactly. Like, after I pay off 20%, it goes away.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not the case.
Yeah.
So it's on the life of the loan it's there for the life of the loan, I should say. The biggest thing that happened in February of 16, HUD introduced their green program. And I say that, but it's become really status quo. You don't see many HUD loans not take advantage of that and actually get closed. If you don't do the green program, if you do straight market rate, your MIP is a 1% fee up front and then 60 basis points ongoing. If you do the green program, it's 25 up front and 25 ongoing. So how many deals can absorb a 35 basis point hit on an annual basis because of DSCR and then 75 basis points? So I think I've done 2 deals since 2016 that have not done the green program.
What is the green program?
So you have to do 2 things. Get your project Energy Star certified and then have a Nationally Green certification. It can be the NGBS program, National Green Building Standard, LEED, Greenpoint, any of those.
This is a question you might not have the answer to, but how much more expensive does that make your project?
It actually does not make your project expensive at all.
So you're telling me I can save the environment as well as build the same cost of an apartment complex?
Correct.
Wow.
The main thing and where we get dinged on is the paperwork. So you can comply with the entire program. So you can qualify for the National Green Building Standard. Your building, you just didn't document it. You didn't do the tests for the installation, grade 1 installation, things of that nature during construction. And so one of the things we've worked on, we have good partners on the energy side, on the engineering side, that have established a retroactive certification. And so that's been a lot of what we've been doing, is getting projects that are under 1 year from their certificate of occupancy retroactively certified.
Wow. That
with HUD,
yeah.
One of the fun things that's a little bit specific to our group is all we do is HUD. We don't do much else. Everything else, that's our core competency. This is our 10-year anniversary in business, since 10 years since the founding of our company.
Congratulations.
Yeah. When I joined, I was Dwight Capital's first intern.
Nice.
I was the 8th employee, and now I'm one of 3 partners, so it's pretty fun. But we did this year $1.28 billion.
Nice.
But so going back to the point, anything that can help HUD in any way, shape, or form, we try to be an expert on. So you and I spoke a little bit about this before, but these federal tax credits, the 179D and the 45L, that really got supersized because of the Inflation Reduction Act. They touch HUD tangentially. And the only way they touch it is because the major way to take advantage is prevailing wages, Davis-Bacon wages.
Yeah.
And if you do prevailing wages, along with an Energy Star certification, which you need to do to take advantage of the green program, you get $2,500 a unit. So
fascinating. Do you think you could be a mortgage lender and do Fannie, Freddie, insurance, all sorts of stuff as well as do HUD? Or do you think you need to be like you're obviously very focused on HUD.
Yeah.
Do you think you have to be, or do you think it just makes you better?
I think it is a little bit of your own expectation. So Fannie and Freddie are 60 to 90 day close. So you get your commission check quicker. You close more deals quicker. You can, your time, time kills deals, right? That's that phrase that always comes through.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So HUD is a lengthy process. I can't tell you how many deals that for us died during the rate spike because deals didn't pencil anymore, whether it's new construction or a refinance. So it's a little bit of your own management of your expectations. So we see a lot of our competitors on the bigger shops, they have a dedicated HUD team because the Fannie and Freddie guys don't want to deal with the extra application the extra brain damage. It's now worth it for a lot of people. So we have become singularly focused on that. So my brain is damaged beyond repair.
Well, we'll give you a plug. If you need a HUD loan, give Brandon a call. He'll crush it for you.
Appreciate that.
Thanks, man.
All right. Thank you.